Welcome to our second ever market update. I'm Rob D with Rob B. We're recording this on the 27th of March and it's 8:45 in the morning. Normally I wouldn't bother telling you that, but because things are changing hour to hour at the moment, it's probably worth putting a timestamp on these things. Thank you for your feedback to last week's market update, which is really fantastic. Glad you enjoyed it and we're really happy to be doing it all again. As we said last week, we're always on the phone to each other talking about this stuff anyway, so it's really good fun to invite you in as well. So Rob, to kick it off, I want to turn the tables and ask you the question that you started by asking me last week. How are you feeling?
I feel pretty good, actually. I think the sunshine helps. We've had a great week of sunshine. I think that lifts everyone. But last night was the clap for carers, and I was just blown away. I came out onto my street, and I live on one of those streets where, people say hello, but it's not the most connected community. And to see so many people out, all clapping, making noise, was incredible. Like, it was amazing. And then I went onto social media afterwards just to see what else was going around the country, and had friends send in WhatsApp messages to say that they've had it in their streets and it was incredible. And people said they heard fireworks, and I thought, that's amazing. That's really uplifting in a time where there are challenges. There are also beautiful moments as well. It's not 100% doom and gloom, and in life it's not always 100% wonderful either, but it's always a mix.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the most part people seem to have responded really well to all the measures that are in place. There's widespread support for what's going on. Obviously it's going to become more of a challenge as time goes on and some of the strains of being stuck at home with your family start to show maybe, but on the whole definitely aided by the weather. I'm feeling good as well.
So let's get into it. And this week our agenda is dictated to us because the Times have splashed a front page headline that we just have to start talking about, really, Rob, which is the property market is now on hold. The government's put it on hold. Or if I read the exact headline, it says virus prompts number 10 to suspend housing market. So we can go on holiday for a bit.
Well, I think the reason that it's worth flagging this up is that it's one of a couple of examples of really unhelpful headlines that we've seen this week. The other one we'll come to later on. But if the government has done pretty well so far and their measures have broadly been supported, I think the media have not covered themselves in glory. They just can't help going for the sensationalism at every turn. We see it here in relation to housing. Number 10 has not suspended the housing market. The way that that's worded makes it sound like they've made some kind of proclamation about right, that's it, no one's allowed to do anything. That's just not the case. When you look at it, the reason that where that headline's come from is some guidance that's come out from the government about how to deal with buying and selling homes, transactions that are currently in progress. All it's really saying is, obviously, it's going to be really hard to do some of this stuff because you can't be in physical contact with people. So if you want to put your home on the market and show it to people, you can't because they can't come round. And if you want to move home into a home that's currently occupied, you might not be able to do that. And it's all pretty common sense stuff. So at a time when I think maintaining the public's confidence and optimism is probably one of the most important things that there is to be done. A lot of how we deal with this and respond to it and come out the other side of this is going to be dictated by people's psychology and how they feel about the present and the future. When you get scary headlines, it's so unhelpful.
It really is unhelpful. And you're right, the media has not been a friend to the general public over the last weeks and months, well, years, you could argue. It never has been helpful, certainly not in my lifetime. And that's why it's possibly the worst guide you can give yourself in terms of information, whether it's about the coronavirus or the property market or investments or anything in life, really. If you follow the newspapers and the headlines, you probably lock yourself indoors permanently and never do anything.
Yeah, one area I think is worth touching on before we get into the other unhelpful headline of the week is a development that people should know about around repossessions, which is where things really have been stopped. So the government announced last week, I think at the point we recorded last week, they had said that evictions would be stopped for 3 months. Then when we saw the actual wording of the legislation they put in place, what they'd basically done was gone in and changed the number 2 for the number of months notice you need to give to a 3. And that was kind of it. And for once, I found myself in agreement with Shelter, which I never thought would happen, where they said that actually this doesn't do what you claimed it would. This doesn't actually stop evictions at all. And they were right. So what's now happened is that the government has agreed with the courts that the court will not hear any possession claims, including those that are already in progress, for 90 days. So there's a lot of confusion around this. It's like, well, if you've served notice but it hasn't expired yet, or if you've applied to the courts but it hasn't been heard yet, are you still allowed to do that? They've now put a dead stop to all of that for 90 days, which you could argue whether it's the right thing or not, but it is now consistent with the initial announcement, and it does remove a lot of the confusion. So as this week has developed, I think we've seen a lot of clarification actually on different fronts. Last week was all about just announcing stuff quickly because you just needed to get a message out there and there wasn't a lot of detail behind it. This week, on evictions, on some of the things around transactions, even on things like the business loan scheme, we're starting to see more of the detail coming through. And I think it's understandable that there's a bit of a delay to that because there's a lot to work out.
So, Rob, you've been referring to another unhelpful headline. Enlighten us. What is it? And what's the detail?
You could probably not have to make too many guesses to guess that this unhelpful headline is from the Daily Mail. And the headline is "Chaos for the Housing Market as Banks Stop Mortgage Lending." And you can't really blame them because it's sort of technically true, but when you look into the reasons of it, it's completely different from what you might think. So you hear that and you think, okay, well, banks have stopped lending. That must mean that the banks don't have any money. There's going to be a credit crunch, or they think house prices are going to plummet, so they're getting nervous. When you dig into it, that's not the case. What's happened is basically banks are overwhelmed by people phoning up requesting mortgage holidays. They're having to either shut their call centres or switch people to home working at the same time, which is not helpful. So they're just under a lot of pressure. They're also in a position where surveyors can't go out and value homes, so they're not able to lend. So there have been a fair number of mortgage products withdrawn in the last week, but I think it's important to note that that's not because of any instability in the market or any fear around house prices. It's just purely practical stuff. Another example of this is a couple of lenders have taken off the market all products with a loan to value higher than 60%. So again, the first thing you think is, oh, well, they must be scared that house prices are going to fall and they don't want that exposure. Actually, the reason is they can rely on desktop valuations for when the loan to value is less than 60%, but not when it's above. So because surveyors can't go out and actually do valuations, that's where the line is drawn where it is. So once again, it's really important to understand the nuance here and not get spooked by the headlines, because the media can't help themselves at the best of times, and this is not the best of times. So there's some pretty apocalyptic stuff out there with reality that doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, and as we said, that's in all aspects of life, and particularly life seems to be the coronavirus at the moment, and that's what the media talk about a lot. And I've picked up a few of my friends on this who've sent headlines, and then I've gone in and read the headline of the story and gone, well, A, B, and C doesn't stack up, or actually, that's an interesting headline, but here's 4 links to counter that sensationalism that you've just sent. And people will do that. They'll read a headline and not stop to read it or question it. Question what's in the content and go, is this true? This is quite a big thing that's being said. Let me counter this and let me read other alternative views. I know that takes time, but with the articles that are being sent or the headlines that are being sent round, I think we all have to be a bit responsible with what we send on. A lot of viral stuff has gone out over the last few weeks. You've probably seen that, WhatsApp messages and Facebook threads and so on, where people are saying, oh, if you do these type of things, you can prevent getting the coronavirus, or I've had this information from someone and you need to know that this thing's about to happen. And then you actually just Google and go, okay, let me question that article, particularly the leaked stuff, and you find out it's just viral nonsense. And that little bit of effort to go, wait there, this is quite sensationalist, let me just check, will calm yourself right down. And then you can actually go and push back up the chain and educate that person, who hopefully will educate the person who's then passed it on. And don't get me wrong, there's some really intelligent people I know who've done this. So if you've been a victim yourself of sending these things on because you've just got in a panic and, oh my God, I can help people if I pass this information on quickly, don't feel silly. It's easily done. But I think working in property and putting deals together for so long, I think I've just become a bit of a cynic. So it helps. It helps when dealing with developers and putting deals together that I don't believe everything that's put in front of me, and I do question it, and I apply that to the media as well, so it puts me in a good stead. But be careful with what you consume. Don't take it at face value. I know this sounds like basic stuff, but it's so easily done in this crazy world that we live in. The world's crazy enough at the best of times, but it's just got crazy with some extra sprinkles on at the moment.
Yeah, it's easy for us to spot the property stuff straight away because that's what we know about, but you might see something else where you can't immediately see through it and you need to do a bit more digging to see if it's true. But you're right, I think it's important to be responsible, and before sharing something, take the time to read it, and ideally take the time to verify and whether it's true and find other opinions. If everyone takes responsibility for doing that, there'll be a lot less fear out there. So that's what's going on in the crazy old world. But Rob, let's bring it back to us. That's always nice to do, because what we're doing is of more interest to people than cures for pandemics or anything. But we have had questions about it. We've had people asking us about what we've been doing and how we've adapted our business in the face of what's going on.
Yeah, for those who don't know, we run a business, a collection of businesses actually, and we employ over 50 people. So our focus is not just the property market, far from it actually. Our focus is the team, and that's where, when all this kicked off, my headspace went to straight away. It's really interesting. A few years ago, actually many years ago, I read one of Richard Branson's books, and in that book he said that his team comes first and then customers come second. And I've heard other people say that in different forms. And before I ran a business and before we did all this together, I didn't get it. I was like, what? Customer is king. That's always the most important thing. And I understand it now, because I understand it on a few levels. I understand it on how much you care, how much responsibility you feel for making sure you provide wages in difficult times, but also how important the team is, because if the team isn't number one, then the customers, who are very important as well, don't get that service and don't get the experience that you really want to be delivered. So I understand why that's said now, and I really, really do believe in it. So the team is where a lot of our headspace has been. So last week we had to take everyone at short notice to home working. So the majority of our business, probably 80%, maybe 75% of our business are in offices now. It used to be a lot more home workers. We still obviously have a sizable number, but for a big chunk of the business, we had to move them from our London and Manchester offices into home working. Now, luckily, we set the business up a long time ago to be able to operate from the cloud, probably for our own selfish needs, because we wanted to mooch around and work from different places. And Aaron, who heads up our IT, does a great job with that as well. So it was fairly easy to do. In 24 hours, everybody was working from home, which is phenomenal. It was really good. And also the clients that we work with have been really supportive and receptive to it as well, because obviously there's going to be a few hiccups. So it's been challenging, but I've actually loved it in a way as well, Rob. I don't love working from the same room every day, because my personality type, that sends me crazy. But I'm loving the team spirit. I'm loving watching how people are coming together. If you follow our Instagram stuff, you'll see some of the behind the scenes in the stories there. We've got, it's hard to list all the things that are going on, but it's like everyone's come together. This hasn't been forced by me and you. It's been, organic. The team has said, right, we want to do these things. So they're taking photos of like spring and what they're seeing from their garden to their daily exercise. There's wacky workouts with Charlie, which I've not done, but I've seen the video of what's been going on Instagram, and I just think that's amazing. We have a thought for the day, and often a little story or something to think about from Tony, which is brilliant. And then we have beers on Friday at 4 p.m. and loads of other things as well. It's kind of, don't get me wrong, this is a serious time, but I think it's actually, like, for a lot of people as a business, brought our team closer together, and we're looking out for each other, and I think that's it's a beautiful thing. It sounds a bit weird to use the word, beautiful with business, because you don't often put them together. You think business is cold and hard and calculated, but they're not. The vast majority of businesses do care about their teams, and that's where most business owners spend their time thinking. Is my team okay? Are we doing the right thing by the team? And it may not always seem like that to the team, because you have to make sometimes tough decisions that people don't always agree with. But that is playing out. It is a beautiful thing what we're seeing within our team, and it makes us really proud because, as I said, Rob, it's not us pushing it. It's happened all by itself.
Yeah, proud was the word I was going to use. That's how I felt this week, seeing how everyone's responded. Like we were saying earlier, managing your own psychology and that of those around you is one of the most important things that you can do at this time. And the way that everyone's responded has just been absolutely fantastic. And like you say, most of it from them, not us kind of coming up with this stuff. It's just happened. And it's worth noting as well that they're doing it under really difficult circumstances. Like, if you're set up for home working, that's one thing. But if you weren't expecting to work from home, everyone's home situation is different. Some people will be well set up for it. Others will have difficulties doing that because of the way things are at home. A lot of people have got children at home that they're trying to work around as well. And at the same time as all that, this isn't exactly a business as usual situation. So they're under significant strain from clients, understandably, calling up, trying to figure out what's going on and asking for advice. Also, the team trying to figure out what to do on the hoof and put policies in place for things that have never happened before and that nobody ever thought would happen. So at a very difficult time, the team has responded brilliantly. And I think it's worth noting as well that for the most part, our customers have responded brilliantly as well. In any of these situations, not everyone is completely understanding, but for every landlord who's been kicking up a fuss about something, there have been so many more who've been really understanding, wanting to work with their tenants. We even had somebody like offering their property rent free to anyone who worked for the NHS. So I think we're seeing a lot of goodness coming through, not just in our team, but more broadly as well. And that's really important in business and investment and in everything else. Yes, it is about the numbers, but there comes a time when you have to set that aside as much as you can do and just work together to get through it.
Absolutely agree. So let's get into the numbers. Let's get into the cold, hard stuff, because there are deals that are happening and being done. Some people have switched off, and I get that. I understand why. But there are other people who are really switched on. And we have to be, that's part of what we do. We can't switch off. Like, complacency will hurt us, as a business and as an operation and as investors. And what we are not going to be is complacent. So we've been putting deals together in the background for one of our businesses, Property Hub Invest, and it's just really interesting. We never really talk about this in too much detail, partly because we can't really name names, but give you an insight of some of the things that have been happening. So it might give you encouragement to think, okay, I could do this by myself. I can operate this way. Now, first of all, the national developers, as you may have heard in the media, are shutting down their sites. They're shutting down their sales offices, pretty much every national developer. So all the big companies that you can think from, home builders, they've all shut down their sales offices. And a lot of them are shutting down their sites as well. And I think soon they'll probably be forced to do that. Now, that's not great for them, but it is great for property investors because national developers don't have other ways of selling. They sell through their sales sites. They don't put them elsewhere with other agents. So that creates opportunity. But because we've worked with a lot of these developers over the years already and helped them out at year end and half year to help them hit targets and done deals in the background with them, we've seen a huge uplift in conversations with them over the last week or two. A lot of them are still scrambling around, admittedly, trying to think, oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to save our year? And they're a bit more panicky. Some are a lot more switched on. One of the biggest, and I can't say who it is, but one of the biggest developers, they've been very active with us. And we did a deal not so long ago, a couple of months back in Wakefield, and we were able to get the deal because it was the end of the phase one of the site, and that was great, but it was limited on the amount of numbers we could do because they had phase two coming, but they didn't want to do a deal on that, understandably, because they didn't need to. But if they could shut down this area of the site, shut down the sales office of this site, and they did a deal. We've managed in the last couple of weeks to do a deal on that phase two. Not because it's year end, not because it's year end, or not because it's half year. None of those normal reasons for why we get a deal done. Not because the site's coming to an end. No, the site's going to be in the middle. It's on its way. The reason is the coronavirus. So we were able to put a deal together last week for our clients. They took advantage of a very strong deal that, quite simply, we wouldn't have got 2-3 weeks ago. And we're having other developers contact us and go, yeah, we told you no to that before. Are you still open? I'll give you another example. There's a deal that we've been working on in Nottingham for months and months and months. And we started off hundreds of thousands of pounds away. And we kept saying, no, we can't do it. That's not a good enough deal for us. Kept walking away. And they've gradually come down closer to where we wanted to be. We were within £150,000 of where we wanted to be over across 10 units, so between £10,000 to £15,000 off per unit. So a significant sum, and that was stalemate. That was it. That was about where it was left about a month ago. Last week, we got a call. They could find a way to bridge that gap. And the deal's not done, and it might not get done. But that's the point. That £150,000, £10,000 to £15,000 a unit, which is a lot of money. So even if you're buying as an individual, £10,000 to £15,000 difference to where we were a month ago. A month ago, they said they absolutely couldn't go to this point. And today, we're in advanced negotiations to be able to get that deal across. And that's the opportunity right now. And it's not being ruthless. We're just putting ourselves out there and saying, hey, we know it's difficult. We know there's deals that we can do with you. Do you want us to help us be an exit for you? And, understandably, for a lot of these developers, we're not their first choice because they'd rather sell for full value and full price. But when these times occur, when these blips happen in the economy, it does create opportunity. And some of our investors are not being complacent and taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think over the next few weeks, we'll probably see even more of that because, like you mentioned, some developers are just kind of running around at the moment, panicking, trying to figure out what's going on. But also, lots of businesses in general are still trying to adapt to a very different way of working, practically. And so their attention is going to be elsewhere. So I would have thought, Rob, that in a couple of weeks' time, there's going to be even more deals to be done.
Yeah, I really think there will be. I think it's for the deal-making part of our team, it's a great time for them. Obviously, for other parts of our businesses, it's not so great. But for that department, it's a really good time. They are having great conversations. They are having no trouble getting people to pick up the phone and talk. Even if it's not yet, we're still trying to sort things out. The conversations are happening. The emails are being returned. There's opportunity there. And you don't have to work with us to get these deals. Of course, you're more than welcome to. But the point is if you do this by yourself already and you hunt deals for yourself, there are opportunities out there with effort. You could just press pause like a lot of the country and world has done for a month or two. But by doing that, are you missing out on a deal? Are you missing out on a deal? Are you missing out on an opportunity that's only going to be here now? Because that vendor, that seller that you could communicate with may have more confidence like you in 2 months' time. So therefore thinks, you know what, I will set it out. I won't do a deal. So just be careful. Think about it. Yes, it is a difficult, challenging time. Let's not pretend it isn't. It is. However, does that mean that everything has to stop for you? You have to close down all opportunities? Or actually, can you become more alert? And because that's what the best investors do, whether it's stocks or property, that's what they do. Let's get into stocks, Rob. We don't do this very often, but we do it over the phone. And it's been bonkers. We've been watching the markets over the last few weeks and looking to get in ourselves, thinking, okay, what do we want to do? Not in a big and meaningful way, just because there's just opportunity here. Because while the property market hasn't crashed, the stock market has. And that makes it attractive, or at least interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to get into this because I think when we started talking about these market update shows, we thought we were going to spend more time talking about the markets than we have so far. There's just been so much going on in property from day to day that we have to do those updates as well. It can't wait until next week. But the markets have been fascinating. They've just been all over the shop. Like you had to have massive falls followed by a couple of up days, followed by a down day. And that's just the general markets. If you look at individual shares, there's just been some really weird stuff going on. Like we were talking about this yesterday, Rob. We're looking at Persimmon, the house builder. I think it was on the same day they suspended their dividend and shut down all their sites, and their stock went up by 15%. Like, what's going on? There's mad stuff happening all over the place. I suppose the difficulty is you never really know how much the market has priced in. So yesterday, the US jobs numbers came out. They were really bad, but because everyone was expecting them to be really bad and possibly even worse, that had been priced in advance. So the markets actually grew a little bit yesterday. So it's really difficult to figure out what is happening.
It really is, and talk about opportunity as well, and talk about not sitting on the fence too long. I'm starting to get to that point, like, should I now go in and make a bit of a move? And like I said, this is not game-changing investment levels. It's just more out of interest and opportunity, and just thinking, okay, let's do it. Let's take advantage of it. But we could hold out too long. But part of me thinks, like, Donald Trump, he's such a loose cannon. That what's he going to say or do? I'm not hoping for the markets to fall, but I wouldn't be shocked if he says something or comes up with some daft idea for a few days that sends the markets tumbling. Then he has to react and get them reassurance and confidence back in, and the markets will recover. But I'm almost waiting for a Donald Trump mess up, let the markets fall, and then that's my trigger point. That's when I want to go in. It may never happen though, and I might miss the whole opportunity. And it's still really good now. There's still incredible value right now. Taylor Wimpey's another one. You look at Taylor Wimpey, the share price is way down. They don't have any debt. They own lots of land. They're well-run operation, and they don't have any debt. So what's the risk? They're not going to go under. But yet they are, massively, discounted from where they were a few months ago.
Well, an even clearer example of that is RBS. That's a bank that is still partially owned by the taxpayer. At one point, that was down 50%. Well, it's probably not going to be allowed to go bust if it's partially owned by the taxpayer. That would seem a bit counterproductive. And are you really saying that like half of its future earnings have been foregone? I mean, the whole point really is that a lot of the value from shares is on the future. It's not just on the next year. And of course, for lots of companies, the next year is a disaster. But if you got falls of like 30% plus, you're writing off a lot of future earnings, or you're pricing in a lot of risk of the company going out of business. Some cases that's going to be justified, some not. And I think that's why there are opportunities when especially last week, when everything just fell pretty much indiscriminately, every asset just went down. Some justifiably so, some probably oversold in panic, therefore creating opportunity. Like you say, though, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to get things right, but also very wrong. And we're very much not making any specific recommendations on this podcast or giving any advice about what you should do. I think it's definitely still time to be careful, Rob, because things are just absolutely all over the place. And probably when that volatility settles down a bit and you're not seeing these insane day-to-day swings, that's probably when you might decide it's time to get in, because you'll have a little bit more confidence in that things have found their level. That means that you're not going to find the bottom, but you're never going to be able to time it and find the exact bottom unless it's purely by chance.
Yeah, that's the sensible advice, Rob. It will not bounce back as quickly. The markets, they will grow over time and get back to where they were, but it might take a year, might take a bit less, might take a bit more, but it's not going to be 2 weeks. So the window of opportunity, yes, you're not going to get the very bottom, and the chances of Donald Trump doing exactly what I've just described in the next 2 weeks, as crazy as that guy is probably not going to happen. So if it does, then you may want to make some moves, but chances are it won't. The markets will go up and down for different reasons over the next few weeks, and then eventually start to steer back upwards. Let's end on the up, because we started on the up because I talked about the claps for carers, and that was incredible. And I just want to make an observation, and hopefully you can relate to this as well, is that while this is a challenging time for all of us in different ways, and some, really, really bad, there's also a lot of good that's come out of this. I've never known the country so united. I was trying to think back when was the last time I felt this togetherness, and it's probably the Olympics in 2012. And that was when the nation felt like it came together. And if you remember that summer, there was a lift, there was a euphoria, there was something special going on. But I think there's something even bigger happening this time. And while there is this negativity circling around, there's also this community and this togetherness and this caring nature that people seem to have for each other. And it's bringing the best out of people. Stress exaggerates people's personalities, and there are people who will do the worst when they're stressed, but there are people who'll do the best as well. I think we should focus on that. Brexit may have broken this country and may have divided us, but isn't it weird that the coronavirus could be the thing that brings us all back together?
I think that is a wonderful point to end on, and of course, I completely agree. It's very easy to feel optimistic when the sun's shining outside like it is now, when we had events like we did last night. And as if that weren't enough, another opportunity that's come out of this is it's given us the opportunity to podcast 3 times a week. So thank you for listening to us on Friday. We're going to be back on Tuesday answering more of your questions because we've had absolutely loads, as you might expect, with the way things are at the moment. And then next Thursday, we've got a really fascinating episode of the podcast planned where we're going to be sharing insights from our team, from the conversations that they've been having and the observations they've been making. So you won't want to miss any of that. But until then, have a great weekend. See you soon. Bye-bye.